Well, it's hot. I don't know how else to tell you, folks, but it's hot and it's humid. We've got the beginnings of what should be at least a 5 to maybe 7 day heat wave in the northeast and northern mid Atlantic states. And it's pretty obvious when you go out. And of course, the heat wave that has been raging pretty much straight through the last 2 months, with some breaks from time to time, short ones across the lower Mississippi Valley and the southern and central plains. That continues, and that's going to continue for a while longer. Uh, that's really pretty much the story as far as weather is concerned, because, well, everything else is just kind of quiet, and we're going to talk about that and more on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. I guess Joe, I know he had a library talk today at 6, which was supposed to end at 7:30. So he said he was going to be here. So I'm just thinking that maybe he's hung up a bit. So I will get things started tonight. First of all, I want everybody to know that I have my new glasses, which I picked up today, and I'm really excited because the actual strength of these glasses is only slightly stronger than the ones that I got my last pair, which was basically 3 or 4 years ago. Well, it's made a huge difference because I guess over time those lenses get dirty and get harder and harder to clean. But I'm seeing everything clearly, and I am one happy camper. So that's a big plus. We uh, had some hot weather today, obviously, and that is going to pretty much be the main story going forward until we get such time as something to come down from Canada and to break the spell. When that comes, I don't know, but we'll see. In the meantime, welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight. Hope we all had a terrific day. Also, want to welcome those of you that are watching from the meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app, which, by the way, is in full working order again. It's amazing. It was a simple fix that required a small element of code, and it took 8 weeks to get it done. But it finally did get done. So that's all back to normal and working 100%. So if you've got the app, great. Make sure you use it. If you don't have the app, you can download it for free on Google Play or on the App Store. I'm also showing up on a new platform that I have the link pinned up to the top of the chat board, MedX, which is a collection of forecasters all over the United States doing some local weather. And oh, we have Joe is waiting for me to let him in. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing him here. So I'm not sure why. But let me try to let him in. Let's see where he is. And hold on. So Joe, if you could hear me, I don't have usually that little box comes up and says, let me in. But it didn't come up. So let me resend you the link just in case. Let's try that again. Let's see. I'm going to resend Joe the link, and hopefully this will work. So this was kind of weird, or actually, it already started off weird as I was setting up the show. By the way, for some reason I had no audio. I have no idea why. Um, and it took me a little while to figure out that I just basically reset a few things, and that was that. But um, so now Joe can't seem to see me. So let's see if I can resend him this Zoom link. Sorry, folks, for the delay. I appreciate your patience. These things do happen from time to time. And here we go. Okay, so he's got I just resent him the Zoom link. So let's see if that's gonna solve the issue or not. Let's hope it does. I'm gonna just check here on the settings. Uh, thing is seems to be okay on this end. See if I don't understand. Nope. Hold on 1 second. I don't understand, Joe, why I'm not seeing you. I can't seem to see you get this link. I don't know if that's a Zoom problem or it's me. Um, I don't have the link. This is gonna be, oh, finally it came up. Okay. He's coming, folks. He's almost there. He's connecting to audio. Very slowly connecting to audio. But you can see his name there on the screen by now. You'll see it. Joe Rao. Aoerao. All right. I did click, so let's see what happens. Something going on here because it's with Zoom because I'm, you know, it everything is slow. Noticing that everything is slow here. It's very strange. So, I mean, I'm sitting here. You can see on this to my left, it's Joe Rayo's name is there. It's waiting to load. It took 10 minutes for that link to come up. All right, so you know what? Until he comes up, why don't we do this? Let's do a little bit of weather, and as soon as he comes up, I'll know. I'll hear him. So anyway, I managed to get the high temps today around 4 o'clock. I don't think they changed very much, and it was pretty much a day of widespread readings around or just over the 90-degree mark. I will say that from what I saw, anyway, there was not a lot of straying from what was put out by the models. It was mostly upper 80s and low 90s. Let's ignore that 101 there because that obviously is wrong. But most highs reaching upper 80s and low 90s. In low 90s in southeastern New England, upper 80s to low 90s across Connecticut and Massachusetts, the Hudson Valley, and points northward. And we'll go a little bit further south now and take it to the highest I saw in and around the New York City area was Newark's 94. Many of the areas on the south shore of Long Island, and this is what happens when you get a northwest wind. You see temperatures that are generally up in the upper 80s and lower 90s. And that is, again, also pretty much the way the guidance had it. Same goes across northern New Jersey. Eastern Pennsylvania was mostly upper 80s to around 90 degrees. And as we move a little bit further to the south, we saw highs today generally also upper 80s and low 90s across Maryland, Delaware, and down into Virginia. Now, some of the temperatures actually dropped even lower as you went down into Virginia and points south. And the reason for that is we had cloud cover. And I can attest to the fact that, at least by me, temperatures today, I didn't even get to 80 degrees today. I had a low of 65 this morning. So that's usually a pretty good launching pad to at least get me up to the middle 80s. But I did not have much in the way of sunshine. I haven't personally seen any thunderstorms around over me, but I know there were a couple around earlier. But the cloud cover, at least up here in the mountains, really kept the temperatures down. You can see the high temperatures, which just flashed on there for a moment, and then they disappeared. So hopefully they will come back. There you go. Oh, now they disappeared again. So 82 was the high for where I am in Blairsville. At 88 for Atlanta. I'm sorry, that's Gwinnett County Airport. So Joe's trying to get in again. So let's see what's going on here. Let's see if I can get Mr. Rayo up on the screen. Oh, you're with us. I hear your voice. I honestly, Joe, I don't know what the issue is. It might have been a Zoom issue.
It might have been. I mean, I literally finished a Zoom library talk and went straight to you, and ended up with. So finally, I said, and I guess you saw it on the chat board. I'm just going to shut everything down and bring everything back up again. which is like the equivalent, by the way, of hitting something with a rock. And
Well,
that'll work.
what
That'll work.
was also strange was the fact that I had no when I started to set the setup process and I bring up my software, I had no audio. So I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, okay, the settings got changed again, but this time around the settings didn't get changed. So I had to kind of do the same thing. I shut down that software, brought it back up, and then I was able to get the settings going. Uh, then you came up and finally that the admit box came up in the corner and I clicked on it and it literally you sat on my left for about 4 minutes. I guess at that
Right.
point you started to reset. Okay, you know what? We're here, and actually I wanted to bring up something with you that I saw yesterday, and I want your opinion on it because you know how much I value your opinion.
Yes.
So I'm not going to say which New York station did this, and I sort of did a double take, but they had their 7-day forecast up with highs and lows, but and I went and double checked the numbers, but instead of using temperatures, they used heat index numbers.
Oh, give me a break.
No, I'm serious. I'm not going to say which New York
In
station
other
did
words, in,
this.
in other words, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to go through a protracted spell of temps in the low to mid 90s, actual ambient air temperatures. Some executive producer probably said, "Hey, why don't we make it even worse for people? Make them really feel bad. Make them really feel like we're on the precipice of cataclysmic temperature and climate change bureaucracy. Let's use heat index instead." And probably had what, 102, 104, 106. Is that
Well, they
what
had
the situation?
what caught my eye was the fact that immediately caught my eye was that for Thursday in the high temperature box they had 104, and I saw that and it's like no, that can't be the temperature for a high. It's either a mistake. And then I looked at all the numbers that they had right through the week, and I'm like, those aren't high temperatures. Those are heat index numbers. They're actually using the heat index. I mean, that's just. There was a part of me that really wanted to go off, and then I just said, you know what? It's none of my. I'm not part of that. But and we talked about this last night with the to make the heat look even worse, even if it's when it's normal conditions. I'm not saying what's going on in Europe is normal, but even during normal conditions in the summertime, and they're using these really deep red colors to indicate that the Earth is burning to a crisp. There's this like
Right.
cycle, there is this psychological game that's being played and it's being done by the news media. I don't think it's being done. I mean, certainly not being done by. It's being done by news media management. Okay, in order to
Yes.
you know get that
Yes.
get those apocalyptic clicks on there. I
Exactly.
was furious when I saw it. I was just absolutely
And
furious.
Joe, this is the society that we're living in. I'm not saying that, and people are all, they're saying like in London, it was 104.2 degrees. It's the hottest temperature ever recorded in London. Now, I'm going to make the assumption that London has a very long record of temperature and precipitation that goes all the way back, probably to over a century, kind of like what we have at
I,
Central
I, I
Park.
actually, if I remember, I think I remember reading, Joe. I think they have records that go back as far back as 1800, maybe even further back, even
Okay.
back further.
Now, what they were all jumping up and down about was that the temperature today at London, hottest temperature ever recorded in London. But I am sure that there have been over the years in London temperatures that have seen the ambient air temperature go well up into the 90s. I would even be surprised if would be surprised if at least there were a few days in triple digits in London in their history. They're saying this is the highest temperature ever. They're not saying it was the first time that they ever got to over 100 degrees. And back in 2003, the planet Mars came to a point in its orbit closest to the Earth for something like 60,000 years. In fact, it was closer. The next closest approach of Mars was something like 500,000 miles, behind that record of closeness. And Neil deGrasse Tyson at the Hayden Planetarium, when they asked him what he thought, oh my God, Dr. Tyson, 60,000 years, Mars hasn't been this close. Dr. Tyson said, really, it's maybe 500,000 miles closer than it's ever been. It's like you saying, going out into the Atlantic Ocean at Jones Beach, and you're going out 100 feet out into the water off the shoreline, and you're standing there and you're looking out, and then maybe a year later you go back and you go out 115 feet out, and when you turn around, you tell everybody, "Hey, everybody, I'm 115 feet out. This is the
farthest I've ever been,
and the closest I've ever been to Europe in all this time." Yeah, I mean,
it's like a who cares moment.
It's the same. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. It is amazing that they did get as hot as they did, but please don't make it sound like they've never been anywhere near that. They have. I saw today that they were listing records on another television station here in New York. They say this is going to be a lengthy heat wave. We may go as many as 5 or 6 days out, but we have had days, 7 days in a row, 8 days in a row, 10 days in a row.
Is it the record 13? Is it 12 in New York City? It's 12, 13, whatever it is.
1953.
Yeah.
1953, 12. And I'm saying to myself, so we've had periods where we've had extreme heat like this for a very long period of time. Why are you making it sound
like it's never happened before?
Like it's never happened before, that you've never had heat like this? Ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Well,
come on. Now you say that they're trying to put heat into seasons.
Yes. I saw it. I wish I had screenshotted it, because I tried to find it this morning and I couldn't find it.
We're going to be very good and very nice and not mention the television outlet that did that. But you were going to tell me after we're off the air which outlet did do that.
Oh yeah, no, right? I definitely will tell you.
Yeah, right.
Meanwhile, here's another example. So I'm going to switch over here to go to the high temperatures. And by the way, I did not, believe it or not, Joe, I show you the town high today.
Yeah, hold on, I got to stop you in the middle here. We have somebody on the chat board, Toby or Tobes Niguana Gadru. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name correctly. And he says, it doesn't, wait a minute, it's flying off my screen here now. It doesn't get this hot in London. In fact, it's unusual for London to be this hot. I didn't say that it was normal when you get to near 100 degrees. I didn't say, and neither did Joe, that temperatures in the 90s to 100 is normal. Yes, I admit it. He admits it. You admit it. It is unusual. But what we're saying is, has it ever happened before? Yes. And has it happened more than once or twice in the 100-plus year history of London that they've been keeping records? Yes. It's just that, again, today it was the highest temperature ever recorded. Good. All right? But what I'm saying is, to see temperatures of 95 or 100 in London is unusual, but it's not something that has never, ever happened. And of course, I'm sure the number one in London, Joe, the newspaper, The Sun. They have a newspaper tabloid called The Sun. I'm sure The Sun, the first 5 pages of The Sun, is showing scenes of the sun going supernova.
Yeah.
Or what would happen if we were approaching the sun, like that Twilight Zone episode? It happens every once in a great while. It does happen that we do see something like this. I know that
it's just that we're getting to a point now that almost every day we're being bombarded with what are all right, let's call them anything from ordinary events to maybe extraordinary events. I mean, it's not every day that a place makes hits an all-time record high like it did in London. Okay, but that's it. It was one day. I mean, it's hot, and there's probably going to be another day or so of heat. But what's really getting ridiculous is that, and this is what you and I object to, and I do. I mean, they were going off the deep end because you know it hit 90 3 days in a row last week. Oh, it's a heat wave. Who cares? It's July. You're supposed to have heat waves in July. You know what? You have them in August, and sometimes you have 90-degree runs that start the.
They've latched onto this.
Yeah,
They've
it's just
latched
this
onto this. Now,
constant.
this is a sidetrack. This is a sidetrack story. This is a story different from all the other horrendous stories that have broke over the last few weeks in terms of the gun control, in terms of the January 6th thing. They have latched onto the cataclysm of climate. But you want to know what? This is heat. This is heat, and this gives you an opportunity, or gives the news media the opportunity to talk about extreme heat. But you know what? The tropics are quiet. The Atlantic Ocean is dead quiet.
Yes.
There's nothing going on. What would happen? What would happen if we had a year like 2005, where by this time in the calendar we already had like 14 or 16 tropical systems or hurricanes? You know what the news media would be talking about? Oh my goodness, all the hurricanes. And this is going to become this is going to be becoming more and more common in the years ahead, that we're going to see this many hurricanes and tropical systems because they're increasing because of global warming and climate change or whatever. But you want to know what? Guess what, folks? I haven't seen a single news media, mass media comment or story about the hurricane season this year. Nobody's talking storms and how things are changing because of climate, because there's nothing going on.
No, but what you but what you are seeing are people writing about the fact that, oh, well, we haven't really seen very much activity so far, but guess what? It's all going to rev up. So let me point out 4 make-believe tropical waves that didn't exist and say, they might develop, they might not develop. And then, as I told you yesterday, you check on the Hurricane Center's website, and they had absolutely nothing. Or let's talk about the fact that we've got the E storm out in the Pacific, and in the Eastern Pacific, and try to make that sound as if this is some sort of apocalyptic year in the East Pacific, which it's not, okay, by any stretch of the imagination.
They usually have twice as many of that of storms by this time.
Oh, especially if it's an El Nino year, you'd be up to the J storm already. You probably would have had 2 or 3 storms die out on their way to Hawaii. You are constantly being bombarded. It's like psychologically they're just kind of wearing you down. And you know what? And I'm going to refrain from getting political here to an extent. I'm going to be kind, okay? But the president of the United States tomorrow, Joe, guess what? From what I understand, he's going to be declaring a climate emergency. Okay? He's going to be declaring a climate emergency tomorrow. This is what I've heard. Okay? And, everything's an emergency. Now everything is an emergency. That's the new way that politicians are able to try to get things done, and quote unquote get things done, the legislative branch and everything else, and just sort of throw out these, oh, we've got an emergency, so you can't do this and you can't do that, and you have to do this and you have to do that, and it's just sickening. It really is. And you and I thankfully keep an even keel on this show. We just do weather, okay? People come on here sometimes on the chat board. There's some people that'll come on and say, well, why aren't you talking about weather manipulation and all this other stuff? Because you know what? That doesn't belong here. We just do weather, whatever. So that's chemtrails or whatever it is. By the way, it must be climate change for me too, because I did not get out of the 70s today here. Okay? I did not get out of the 70s. I kid you not. I was 65 this morning. I mean, that usually is easy to get us to like 88, 87, 88. I still haven't gotten to 90, by the way. Today, I did not even break the 80-degree mark. So, and also, if we check out, I mean, it's ridiculous. And also, if I can bring this map up here, we can check out the highs in another place where they're telling you that it's this sort of apocalyptic heat wave that's going on. They were making a big deal about the fact that Dallas hit 100 degrees 11 days in a row. Well, guess what? The record's 42 back in
Yep.
1982. All right? So until you get at least a 30-day streak of 100 plus, then come talk to me. Now, look, it doesn't take away from the fact that the temperatures are really hot across Arkansas. I mean, we've got Little Rock today got to 100 degrees, 111 at Bowie Municipal Airport. I assume that's in Oklahoma, and no, in Texas. I'm sorry, Denton, Texas. I just had it there. West of Denton, Texas, in Decatur. Joe, 111 for a high. Let's see if I can get Dallas here. All right, so Dallas, Fort Worth, because it's probably a competition. Fort Worth's high was 109, but no. Dallas at Addison Airport in Dallas was 108. All right, and I believe Austin was 106. Let me take a look. Where are you? Austin, come in, Austin. Oh, here you go, Austin. 106 in Austin. San Antonio, either 102 or 104. Corpus Christi was nice. You head down there. It was Aransas Pass was 94. And I'm one of the few people around here that can say I've actually been to Aransas Pass. Corpus Christi International Airport, 95. And, of course, inland, it's all over 100. I mean,
it's all driven by the attempt to get people to watch the news and ratings. I'm sorry to say that, and people are saying, how can you say something like that?
Because it's
true.
And we
proved it 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when Texas was in the throes of that frigid spell of cold weather and the ice and the snow, and they were saying this is the worst conditions we've ever had in a century. And you know what I did? I went through the newspaper archives, and I found very similar cases to that in the 1990s and 1980s. And guess what? The headlines back then said the same thing. Worst storm, worst situation in terms of wintry conditions in Texas in a century. The storm is that. It always is the same thing. People have short memories. People don't want to remember from 30 or 40 years ago what happened. And if it did happen, no, don't mention that, because we want to drive the interest up in what's happening now. And I know it's terrible when you lose your power during a wintry situation, and I've done that. In my house, we lost power during cold winter weather back about 20 years ago in this house here in Putnam County. It is terrible, or it's terrible when you don't have any air conditioning and it's extremely hot outside. But it happens. It has happened. It's going to happen again. Don't make it sound like this is apocalyptic and that this is it. This is the beginning of the end. And like I said, if it weren't for the heat, if we were having an active hurricane season, that's what they would be grasping onto, the news media, about how many hurricanes are going on and everything. We haven't seen anybody deployed along the coastline. We haven't seen what's his name from the Weather Channel, sitting on a beach and telling us, the wind is beginning to pick up, because there's nothing happening now. It will happen probably later on in the season, but right now there's nothing to grasp onto to make a news story. So instead of hurricanes and tropical systems, we have to go with the heat.
Right.
Let's go with the heat, folks, and that's what's happening right now.
There's nobody in these stories, by the way. There's nobody in these stories to give kind of a common sense view of things. It just basically it's hot, so they drive that point across in such a way that, as you said, they make it sound as if it's never happened before, and that is just ridiculous. But we see these hot temperatures, obviously, and one of the things that's going on tonight, I'm just going to go to the satellite loops. We're going to run through the weather, what we're supposed to do here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We don't really have a whole lot of thunderstorm activity. In fact, we have hardly any at all happening in the Northeast. So as far as any kind of cooling relief from an isolated thunderstorm, that's not happening. Meanwhile, very impressive shortwave there in northern Minnesota. You can see the curl there on the loop. and that's producing some showers and storms and severe weather in the western lakes. And we're also seeing clouds blowing up in the Carolinas down into Florida, and in the monsoon action that's going on in the southwest. Now, here's the radar. I'm going to just give it a quick refresh here, so we have the latest data on it. And there we go. And you can see in the northeast, except for a couple of isolated storms and well up into upstate New York, and also up in northern Maine, we're seeing some there. The radars are pretty silent. You've got clusters of showers and thunderstorms from Virginia down through the Carolinas into Georgia and Florida. You've got very little going on in and around southeast Louisiana, which is pretty unusual. And take a look at this up in Minnesota, well, north of Minnesota. Then we must have missed this from earlier, Joe. There's like this arc, this arm that must have went through northern Minnesota and swung through now, and it's up in southern on the Canadian side. But what's there is pretty impressive as it rotates around and other cells back over into North Dakota. The Storm Prediction Center has a slight risk with a severe thunderstorm watch up at the moment for northeastern Minnesota into parts of northwestern Wisconsin. You've got some patchy areas of marginal risk, upstate New York and up into northern New England. Also from coastal North Carolina down into east central Alabama, a couple of small areas of marginal risk in northwest Texas, and another one down in Arizona. Now, for tomorrow, we're going to see risk move into the Ohio Valley, Ohio down into Kentucky. Marginal to slight risk there. And then on Thursday, when we have a cold front that's going to be coming through the northeast and mid-Atlantic states, we've got a marginal risk for northern New Jersey northward, Joe. They got a slight risk for all of New England, except for maybe a small portion of Cape Cod. I think that marginal risk might get back down a little bit further to the south. It's sort of, there's like a hole between that and then the marginal risk that you have from southeast Virginia, North Carolina down through the Gulf states. I think we might see that get, sort of hooked up together so that the marginal risk gets pulled down a little bit further south, and maybe even the slight risk gets pulled down a little bit further to the south. This may be our one and only chance for thunderstorms during this work week, by the way, and it's going to do nothing to cool the heat.
No, it's not. It not at all. It will be a one-shot deal, and then what we have to hope for is maybe, and it's exceedingly slight, a pop-up storm maybe for some of you late Saturday, a slightly better chance on Sunday, and again on Monday. But if you're looking for a good old-fashioned, cold front coming down from Canada with its band of, showers and storms that's going to be ushering in a cool, dry airflow, that's not happening. That's not in the cards, at least for the foreseeable next several days.
And you made the point yesterday is that the main difference in the pattern right now is the fact that these systems coming down out of Canada are not digging as far south as they were in June and July. And even the one for this week that actually does dig into the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley and into the Northeast is just as soon as it digs down, it lifts out. So you maybe get a little bit of dew point relief Friday and a little bit of dew point relief maybe into early Saturday before it comes roaring back again going into Sunday. And then the next trough doesn't dig either. It'll pull a cold front through here, but again, maybe some minor dew point relief behind it. And then that lifts out. And then it looks like a ridge wants to build in the Tennessee Valley toward the end of the month, which is kind of interesting. And a trough swings across southern Canada, just kind of bypasses the northeast. And then there's a stronger trough toward the start to get in the first few days of August. See, now I'm just looking at this at 384 hours, Joe. There's this big wrapped up vortex in northern Hudson's Bay. And what would you need to happen to get some of that really cooler air that's going to be up there is if somehow, if this wound up being correct, and we don't know that it is, but I'm just as an example, you've got some blocking going on building up into Greenland. If that gets a little stronger, maybe it could force that vortex down a little bit further to the south. But the way this stands, this would imply that the westerlies don't get any further south than, say, central New York and central New England. That's going to leave things fairly hot and somewhat humid going into the beginning of August.
Yeah, and in fact, the long-range outlook from the Climate Prediction Center is for above normal temperatures in the Northeast, but also above normal precipitation. So there are signs that they are linking the possibility of a muggy, humid, showery type of weather pattern across the Northeast as we move on or make the transition from July on into August. We'll see.
The old runs from overnight were just trying to argue that the the frontal boundary and that northern jet would get just far enough south where the frontal boundary would lie somewhere across the northern mid-Atlantic states and back into the lower Ohio Valley so that you'd get little waves to move along it. So, that would be the implication here. Here's our front for Thursday, which the GFS, you see how it splits the difference. It's got big storm from 2 o'clock in the afternoon when it starts to develop some storms in western New York and western PA. And then you jump to 8 o'clock at night where you've got big storms up in central and northern New England and even bigger storms off the Delaware coast down into the Carolinas and North Georgia and into Alabama. But then there's this kind of gaping hole in the middle where there's nothing. And then we're back to westerly winds and hot temperatures. The next front approaches, as you said, maybe a late isolated thunderstorm on Saturday, maybe a better chance for storms on Sunday evening with a cold front that tries to go by. And then, it just kind of gets hung up, this sort of east-west frontal boundary through the first few days of next week. So maybe there's a little bit of relief in terms of the temperatures, and maybe, I don't know about the dew points, but at least in terms of the temperatures, until that front just could kind of sag southward and go away, and then it gets very warm to hot and humid again as we move through the last days of July until we can get another cold front to come on through. And except for that, there's really nothing in the tropics to talk about. So it's all about heat, and it's all about humidity, and that's it.
Yeah, and I just want to apologize, at the beginning of my rant. I mean, I was set off, Joe, by the fact that you were telling me about that one TV outlet that was showing heat indices as opposed to actual ambient air temperatures, and that's what really set me off. And it's a bad sign, because if they do it now, what's stopping them from doing it tomorrow or for future spells of heat?
Well, wait.
If it's successful.
What about in the wintertime? Now we're going to have wind chill instead of temperatures. So it's going to say that it's going to feel like minus 20. I mean,
right.
There's no stop it. There's no end to this. I mean, it's going to be.
Well, what's concerning to me is that about one station did it, and it found that it was successful because more people were watching because of that. What's going to stop the other stations? And I know, and you know, that they at the editorial meetings they will say something to the effect like, "Well, Channel 17, they're doing it, so why can't we do it? Well, let's try it. Well, we won't do it all the time, but let's just see how it works for us." And that's the beginning. And you know what? It's just like, when you go to a movie. I mean, how many of you have seen the movie Apollo 13 that was directed by Opie,
Ron Howard.
I mean, at the end of the movie, as they're coming down for a splashdown, all of a sudden you hear about a typhoon warning in the splashdown zone. You know what? There was never a typhoon warning in the splashdown zone, but I'm sure that Ron Howard or somebody must have said, "Hey, why don't we make it more interesting?" I mean, if you don't think that 3 astronauts coming back to Earth after their command module blew up, if that's not interesting enough, and if you have to actually add stuff like the typhoon warning, that's right. Even the movies, all the movies that were done about Babe Ruth. I mean, Babe Ruth, greatest hitter in the history of baseball, but they still had to make up stupid things. I think the most recent movie that they had, Babe Ruth supposedly was not running around the bases. He had somebody running around for him. Or that he hit a pop fly, Joe, supposedly in one of the movies. It went up so high that it gave Babe Ruth the time to go around the bases before it all the way around the base to get a home run before the ball came down again. I mean, this is like stretching the truth. This is like altering the truth
completely
and altering things to make it look different. And that's the thing with the heat index on the 7-day outlook. It's absurd.
Well,
it's absurd.
I got a text, by the way, by someone that I know who just kind of said, "Gee, I wonder what station that was." And said sarcastically. Miss Fowlerite says her Mets, where she is in Kansas, her Mets will show the air temperatures plus show the range of heat index numbers just to warn the dangers of overheating. And you know what? That's perfectly reasonable. That's perfectly fine. I have no issue with that.
No, but what you're saying, what you're saying is that instead of the actual temperatures on the 7-day,
right,
they put the heat
they
index
had the
on.
heat index for the high and the low. So, you're not only supposed to be miserable during the day with the heat, but you're supposed to be even more miserable at night when you can't sleep and you don't have air conditioning and you just have a fan blowing and you get a wet towel and you're trying to make your own cool air. I mean, yeah, it's just crazy. Listen, let's get to Briller Jeopardy.
During hot spells, the people in New York, like where our parents and grandparents live, in Harlem, they used to sleep on the fire escape.
Yeah, they would sat out in the streets and you turned the fire hydrants on and that's how you cooled off.
And that was against the law.
Right,
but the cops.
But we did it anyway.
Turn the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let me just acknowledge the super chats tonight. We've got the chairman, Scott Briller. Last time Central Park, by the way, hitting 100 degrees was July 18th, 2012. Thank you for that, Scott. And I saw Leon Probitsky hit super chat also a little earlier as well. And actually 2 hits from the chairman, Scott Briller. Back in the day when he was governor, when I was governor, we didn't have heat waves. Well, you know what? You ain't governor no more. Leon Probitsky also hitting super chat. I think there might be a couple of others in there because I don't have the whole list. Let's run through Briller Jeopardy really fast because I got stuff I got to do. So
all right.
So let's go through it quick. You got them today, right?
These are for you. Now that you're in Georgia, today we focus on all-time records in Atlanta.
Oh God, I have
so
no
here
idea.
within five for credit. The all-time high in Atlanta occurred 10 years ago on June 30th, 2012. What was it?
You know what? I'm going to say it's not as high as you might think. So I'm going to say, I'll say 105.
Look at that. He's given a 5-degree spread, margin of error. 106, Joe. You got it within 1.
Okay.
How about this? What about the coldest temperature ever in Atlanta?
Now I know that here where I am, it's gotten as low. I think it's gotten as low as -17 on the record books. This I'm probably going to just take a wild guess at it. So I'm going to say below 0. I'll probably say -8.
Good Lord. January 21st, 1985, -8.
Oh, Jesus. I swear I'm just guessing here. Go on.
How about the biggest snowfall ever in Atlanta?
And with the superstorm of 93, see, now it depends because if you measure at the airport, I think the airport got like 4 inches, but if you go like on the north side of Atlanta and you head up just in the, if you go, let's put it this way, Joe, when you go north and west, you get a lot more. I'll say 12 inches for the most.
8.3, January 23rd, 1940. Before you were born, remember, kids?
Yes. And by the way, in the superstorm up here, they had every bit of like 3 feet of snow. As the locals have told me.
Yes, we're talking about 93 now, right? We're not talking about Superstorm Sandy or whatever.
Right, 93.
That's another thing. People say Superstorm. This is up here now. Superstorm Sandy. Superstorm Sandy. We've never had a storm that's such Super Sandy. I said, really? How about 1993?
Yeah.
What?
No, these are generational. Those are and I've said this. These are when you get these big storms like this, they're generational events. For the people that are alive at the time, it becomes their signature storm. So it used to be the 38 hurricane. The 93 superstorm is another one. The Halloween storm, whenever that was in 89 or 90.
But we didn't have those kind of storms when I was growing up.
I know. Right. Well, we didn't have governors that went around kissing other people without their permission.
what I ought to do, remind me. I'm going to dig up that video. This is from a two-part series I did at News 12, and this was during a news conference that Cuomo did right after Sandy. And I don't know if he spoke with a meteorologist or whatever, or whether or not it was just his interpretation. But he did say after Sandy, when everything was in mayhem, he said, "Well, we didn't have storms like this. We didn't have storms all these
Yeah.
when they were building New York." I mean, I couldn't. I saw that, and I was preparing this two-part series, and I ran into the control room, and the guy's name was Lenny Hudson, who passed away. What a great guy Lenny was to work with. I said, "Lenny, you got to get that for me. I need that. I want to put that in my report." Couldn't believe it that he had said something so stupid as that. Anyway, number 4, most consecutive days in Atlanta with at least a trace of snow.
3.
At least a trace.
3.
3 in January of 1982.
Was
You're
3?
hot tonight, Joe.
Wow.
Yes.
I need to go play
Yeah.
a lottery ticket. Come on, let's wrap this up.
Most consecutive days in Atlanta above 100 degrees. And not as much as you think.
Yeah. I'll say 7.
Wrong. 4, 2007.
All right.
That's it. We close out Bruto's Jeopardy. And yes, Scott, I will ask the lovely Renata, who's only been here now for a couple of hours, just back from Orlando, Florida with my daughter, if she can come back and do Cooking Briller Jeopardy on Sunday.
All right. So, look, I got to run. So, everybody have a great night. Joe and I will be back tomorrow night. We're off on Thursday. We're off Friday. We're off Saturday. And then we're back on Sunday. So, that's the schedule going forward. And I'm sorry for the technical issues tonight. They weren't actually my fault this time around. But, again, admire the fact that I got new glasses. All right. Have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.